Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to tonight's Joe Chaffee Weather Show. It's the 9th of September, 9/9/19, 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time. Hope everybody had a very good weekend. Finally, Dorian is gone, but boy, did it go out in a style that you would have expected. The hurricane had one last card to play, and that was over Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Saturday morning, it became pretty clear that what we were seeing was intensification, and of course we live streamed about that just as it made landfall as pretty much a Category 2 hurricane. And in some ways, it probably had bigger impact here at this latitude, if only because of the fact that the gales had expanded out so far to the east and west of the center. And there, among other things, power outages, heavy rains that occurred, and then it moved up toward western parts of Newfoundland. I didn't really see any reports about, they were talking about the storm surge with the St. Lawrence River. So if any of our Canadian friends are on tonight from New Brunswick or from Nova Scotia or Newfoundland and might have some information regarding what took place, by all means post it in the chat or post it in the comments section with the video. Now, we're going to talk about the week ahead, which on the whole is relatively quiet, but there are some things going on. We're going to take a look at the tropics because I think we're going to probably get busy again. Maybe not at the moment, and it might take a good chunk of the week to get things going, but I'm guessing that by the time we get to next week at this time, we're going to have something running around somewhere that is going to be threatening. So, someone. So, I know I hate to be vague, but that really is all you can be at this point. And plus, I want to go through the models with you so that this way you know what you're looking at, and also because given that there are people who love to put up pictures of the 300-hour GFS and then go into this long dissertation, which ultimately ends in, but this is not a forecast. So look, if you're going to put a 300-hour map up, then what's the point of putting it up unless you really think it's a forecast? I mean, I'm not quite understanding. I know why it's being done or will be done, because you are going to see stuff over the next several days. I guarantee you. Models are going to be doing all sorts of things. You're going to see all sorts of weather hysterics that are going to start to generate between what happened in the Bahamas and over Florida and everything else, and the nonsense about Alabama and all the rest of it. You know, I kind of expressed my opinion about that. With everything that went on and was going on and still going on in the Bahamas, do we really be needing to have this particular conversation? I mean, it's really silly. You got people that are still buried under buildings and houses that need to be found, among other things. And they're getting all wrapped up over this just utter nonsense. And, I don't know, I just get kind of annoyed with it all. So let's get through tonight's weather, because there are a few things going on that I do want to touch on. And one is the severe weather risk, because we do have a working tornado watch, which you don't see very often in September unless it's being caused by a tropical storm or a hurricane. But we do have a working tornado watch over the state of Iowa. We have marginal risk of severe weather in southeastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina. You're seeing some scattered heavy cells across the Gulf states and some general activity for thunderstorms up in the northwest. And this is per the Storm Prediction Center. And of course, if you're watching this on a replay, it's 7:07 Eastern Time. So be sure to get the latest weather information on any severe weather by going to your local National Weather Service office, which you can find on the internet by going to weather.gov. Okay, GOV. So here we go. The WPC, going to get this done in the beginning so that at least we can set the table on how these folks are thinking about things for the next week. And actually, you can see there's not a whole lot of rain being produced in the eastern part of the United States. The lightest green is less than 1/10 of an inch, and the darker green is between 1/4 and 1/2. So you're not really showing a whole lot of rain up and down the East Coast, except for some patches and along the immediate coast a bit more, Excuse me. And then just offshore the Florida coast, you've got this band of a couple of inches of rain. Now, that looks to me like it is wave-induced with the southeast flow and maybe a tropical system that's north of the Dominican Republic moves west-northwestward. Whether it develops or not, it'll probably mean increasing chances for at least some downpours and some rain over Florida, although they're only showing anywhere between an inch to an inch and a half on WPC, and they kind of line it up off the shore. Now, you're noticing from the Bahamas east, there is substantial rainfall. Now, some of that is going to be just from the tropical flow around what's going to be a rather flat Bermuda high. Whether there's something tropical involved with that further to the east certainly remains to be seen. In the meantime, some hefty precip up in the northern plains and in the western Great Lakes on the order of 3, 4, 5 inch amounts there. Another patch of up to a couple of inches an inch and a quarter to an inch and a half, I should say, across the southern plains and into the central plains and down through parts of West Texas and into New Mexico. Otherwise, the southwest is quiet. The northwest starting to pick up a little bit of action here with some rains coming into Oregon and particularly in northwestern Washington state. And for you snow lovers, when we take a look at the GFS, you're going to see some snow in it coming into the Rockies in the latter part of the forecast period. Whether it's real or not remains to be seen. But in the meantime, on the satellite tonight, I mean, this is the first time in really almost, 2 weeks that we don't have Dorian in one form or another running around. We see that across much of the Tennessee and Ohio Valley, down a bit further south into northern Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, it was just a very warm to hot day, and on the edge of that, you're seeing some showers and thunderstorms firing up in southern Georgia, back west-southwest into southern Mississippi, southeast Louisiana, and of course you've got the severe weather with the next shortwave trough that is moving across the plains and into the western lakes. The Northeast has been dealing with some cloud cover that has been blowing off from some of that moisture that's out in the Great Lakes, and there's also a bit of a weak warm frontal boundary that is setting up, and that is going to usher in the midweek period of hot, borderline, very warm to borderline hot weather that's going to be in the northeast, the southern areas of the Northeast and in the mid-Atlantic states. I would not at all be shocked if we wind up seeing some isolated 90-degree temperatures Wednesday afternoon in parts of New Jersey and down into Maryland, around Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and northeastern Virginia. Would not at all be a shocker to me, because we're still in this same type of pattern with that northern jet flexing back and forth, but it does appear that we are going to get into a ridge position that's going to last a bit longer when the ridge flexes, and that could be setting up things down the road. We'll have to see how everything plays out over time. Got a lot to look at, and do not look at any one particular run, because I'll illustrate why that's as once again is not how you should be handling the view of the future. So I'm just bringing up the surface map here, the frontal boundary that is kind of snaking through the southeast and through the northern Gulf states. The temperatures actually reaching up well into the 90s in parts of northern Alabama and even into central Alabama, and actually all the way down to the Gulf Coast. I'm not sure why they draw this warm front this way, except for the fact that maybe the dew points are a little bit lower on the other side. So I'm not getting the warm front here. That 102, that is hot. And Atlanta making middle and upper 90s today in much of North Georgia, middle 90s in South Georgia, low 90s in northern Florida. So definitely some pretty hot air here underneath the upper high that is sitting over the southeastern part of the U.S. and everywhere else. It's cooler up north. You're looking at 70s. We have this onshore flow thanks to high pressure off the coast of Maine and getting that flow in from off the water. So that's going to hold temperatures down in the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic states through tomorrow, and then we're going to start to see the temperatures jump up a bit on Wednesday, where I think a large portion of that area will be in the 80s to around 90 degrees. Summer ain't done yet, okay? And this is nothing unusual, folks, to get these sort of little bursts of very warm weather for a couple of days. Again, we're all going to be waiting for the flexing that will be occurring with the jet stream. It's been doing it up until now. It'll take a break for a short time to let the ridge play out, and then it'll probably flex again. So I want to start tonight. So the focus is going to be on the tropics, and the models, the global models, all seem to be bullish in one form or another in developing something moving across the tropical Atlantic and eventually finding its way westward. So let's discuss how it gets there, and then we're going to have to look at if it gets there. Okay, so I backed it up to Saturday 2 p.m. where we are dealing with, at this point, you're seeing the remnants of Dorian, which are just off the coast, and there it is. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry. I'm trying to work my my new little paint box here. That it's a Google Chrome extension, and hopefully it will behave itself. So let me get a nice red color for this. There we go. So here we are. Dorian just making landfall over Nova Scotia. And it intensified because you had this short wave that came in the northern stream, caught up to it, and just basically gave it a shot of adrenaline as Dorian lifted up to the northeast. And this happens with storms that reach this latitude. We call it baroclinic deepening, and it will energize these storms just like they would a winter storm, because at this point Dorian was making the transition and was just about extratropical anyway. When you have a storm that's tropical, the highest winds are near the center. You got this sort of solid warm core, and when you have a cold core system, the strongest winds are usually away from the center, and the gales expand. So you don't have the max winds aren't as strong as what you would see in a hurricane. But you have a larger area that's experiencing gales, and this is what happened here. So it was no big shock. We were following this on the water vapor imagery late last week, and you saw the possibility of it happening. Now, one of the things that what is Dorian, or what was Dorian, is now this large extratropical low that moved off of Labrador and passed is passing south of Greenland tonight. Is that you'll notice that over time. Later this week and beyond, you have a large area of low pressure that develops from northeastern Canada all across the northern Atlantic. This is an area that's been dominated by higher than normal pressures, particularly the area around Greenland, for much of the summer. So Dorian has in fact energized the upper pattern in the North Atlantic, so that you finally have gotten rid of that ridge that's up there, and you've gone to lower than normal pressures in this region. So in response to that, we have this big upper ridge that is developing this is for Wednesday afternoon. So you've got this big upper high that is developing in the Tennessee Valley. Actually, you could center the high somewhere in eastern Tennessee, northern Alabama, northwestern Georgia. Everybody underneath all of this will continue to see hot temperatures. Your northern jet has kind of pulled up to maybe into northern Maine. You have the other flow coming in from the west that moves across southern New England, but it's really the ridge, and we're sort of on the edge of this. We're not going to be getting into the superheat that we're seeing down to the south, but it's again another flexing, and there's a bit of a trough that's up here, swinging down through Hudson Bay, and is going to swing eastward over time. And let's see what happens as we play it out through the week. Now, you do have a shortwave trough that moves off of Labrador, Newfoundland, and Nova Scotia by the time we get to Friday. So the upper high weakens a bit. So we do have a cold front that's coming through for Wednesday night, early Thursday. That will set up another onshore flow situation for Friday and cool things down. And then the ridge starts to build back. Now, one of the things that we're going to look at, we're going to look for, the model is taking this shortwave off of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and splitting it away from the jet. You'll notice right here, the bottom part of that trough just kind of breaks apart and dives southward to the latitude of near the Azores. So you've got this upper low here. So the flow splits across the Atlantic. And you actually have westerly winds in the upper atmosphere that get pretty far south of average, almost down to about 30 north in this part of the Atlantic. But at this stage, it's already to the east of whatever tropical system, and this is what the GFS has for late this coming weekend. And oddly enough, which is something you don't see too often, when you match up the late afternoon, if you match up the midday runs of the GFS and the European, in terms of, even though the GFS had this well-developed system, and the European had, keeps it an open wave until it gets it eventually up north of the Dominican Republic, they both had a system at day 10 in almost an identical spot, which is something you usually don't see. But one of the keys to all of this is if we get this upper low to kind of split down, it allows this ridging to develop, and I'm going to draw the upper high at this point. So let's get rid of this. But right in here, there's this narrow east-west high. Part of that ridge in the southeast just kind of it weakens, but then part of it that's off the southeast coast strengthens a bit. But you've got this narrow east-west high across the Atlantic. It's sort of we'll put a little eye over there. It looks like a whale, okay. But the bottom line is that it keeps the west. It doesn't. This upper system is way too far north to have any impact on it. And with this building high in the southwest Atlantic, I would tend to think, especially if it's a weaker system, that it may want to drive it further to the west over time. Whether it develops or not, that's a whole other matter. And I don't think it's something that we're going to really know off the models so much, because they both seem to be looking at different things, with the GFS developing this system and the European not so much. I'm just more interested in the upper air pattern. And as we go through early next week at this time, supposedly, there's a ridge in the east, and that gets actually reinforced. There's one other thing that's going to be happening is, as this upper low drops down to the Azores, an upper high is going to be building up toward Greenland again over the top and building northwestward. So that traps the upper low here. It also forces the ridge up along the east coast at this point. So again, there is support for the idea that any system is going to want to go toward the west or west-northwest for a very, very long period of time. And that, of course, is, as far as development is concerned, that, again, we'll deal with that. Something has to form first. But it would seem to me like you do have a situation where you are going to be dealing with a westerly component of motion for a long period of time. Now, at this point, we're past day 7. I don't know what's going to happen. We got to get, you have to see a system develop first before you get too wrapped up in what the models are doing. One of the things I want to show you as far as caution is concerned is I'm going to go back a couple of runs. I want to go back to the GFS from yesterday at 168 hours. Okay, so actually I want to go to the 240. Yes, come in.
Hi. Are you in the middle of taping?
Yes, I'm live streaming.
Are you? Oh,
Yes.
I'll catch you later.
All right. Sure,
Later.
no problem. That was our Courtney Kane, who works here at FiOS 1 News. So she popped on in. Okay, so take a look at the 240-hour yesterday, and I want to compare it to the European, because they were different in so many ways. Hang on, folks. I'm just trying to get this to move to the bottom, and it's being stubborn. Okay, you know what? When you can't beat it, you join it. So I'll just leave it at the top. All right, so here's your trough on the 240. If this is how the GFS saw things, big upper high over in Missouri. You know, kind of have a northwest flow here into the northeast and offshore. Not too different from what we saw when Dorian was dealing with the east at late last week. So here's your setup on the GFS back from yesterday. Now I want to take to the 18Z run from yesterday for the same time period, and now look at the difference between what you had and now you got this deep trough in the east and digging down, only to have the next model run go to, as it loads, still has that trough, but now it's so broad that it would keep something, you know, offshore. Then on the 6Z, still have that trough, same time period, okay? Still have that trough, but now it's along the east coast, and the tropical system is slower and deeper and further to the east. And this was at 6Z, and now as we get, now look at the difference again. And we're getting closer here, same time frame. This is from this morning's run with the ridge stronger in the east, and the afternoon run also showing that ridge in the east, and the trough is now, there is no trough in the east. You've got this upper low that's east of Newfoundland. This all impacts everything down the road when we watch these storms evolve. So I just wanted to at least spend a little bit of time with the upper air just to give you the idea of how much it's going to change. And by the way, the European, through all of this, is insistent on this big ridge building into the western lakes, which is something that the GFS did on one of the runs the other day. And you can see this trough that extends pretty far to the south. Let me just erase that. But the low from near Nova Scotia has this trough that goes all the way down to just off the Carolinas, this positively tilted northeast southwest trough. Your tropical system is somewhere in here. I mean, it looks like, as deep as this trough is, if it's real, that this trough is going to miss it, and it's going to be responding to this building upper high. The possibilities here are endless. So it just is futile. And again, be very careful with what you see out there, because you're going to see stuff, and it's going to be suggestive of things out, you know, well into the 10 to 15 day time frame. And as you know, those of you who are here on a regular basis, we don't fool around too much with that. So onto the surface map, and then I'm going to jump over the satellites here in a moment. But I just at least we could see the origins here. There's what appears to be, there's another wave coming off the African coast. I'm not 100% sure. The GFS actually takes a low that it forms south and west of the Cabo Verde Islands on Tuesday, and it's that low that it develops into this tropical system approaching the islands sometime toward the end of the week, and sometime toward the weekend, and not this lead system that's out there, which it identifies as a week 10-12 low. And again, the Hurricane Center is mentioning another wave coming off the African coast. So here's the satellite loop tonight, and you've got this wave right here. My menu is huge, I know, but here's that lead wave. You've got this system that's coming off the African coast. Just want to make sure you can see this, and also. You have disturbed weather right here. Looks like there's some kind of upper low here. Whoops. some mid-level or upper-level low, and this is going to be moving west-northwestward toward the Bahamas and Florida. I would tend to think that conditions aren't going to be favorable for any kind of marginal development until it were to get, say, somewhere in this position. So it's not like we're looking at a hurricane approaching. This is a tropical wave, and that's all it is at this point. And you just barely can see it, but you can see the bottom of Gabrielle, which I'm having trouble drawing it here. So before my thing goes crazy, so let's go to the tight view of Gabrielle. Top winds are 50 miles an hour. It's racing northeastward at about 21 miles an hour. 5 o'clock advisory had it at 40.7 and 45.4 west and moving northeast at 21. Top winds at 50. And this is going to become a post-tropical low with time as it approaches Ireland. You can see it here on the GFS. It just basically gets absorbed by that North Atlantic low that's at the top of the screen. There's a remnant that holds together and touches Northern Ireland and into Northern England and Scotland with some rain and showers along about, say, Wednesday evening into Thursday morning. And for us, of course, we've got this high going out. The winds are going to go southwest to west-southwest on Wednesday. We're going to see temperatures rise. An approaching front that will take its time getting through here on Thursday. Another high builds in with another round of onshore flow. So cooler temperatures on Friday that reach down into Virginia and then back up north of us. Another cold front over the weekend with maybe a chance for a shower or storm on Saturday. And not showing very much as far as Sunday is concerned. But again, it's with the jet pulling up the way it is, we are going to probably get, in general, warmer than average temperatures in the coming days, except for when the onshore flow takes in a big way. I promised you a little bit of snow, and it doesn't do it on this run. That's odd. Let's see. Let me make sure I got that. Oh, there it is. Hang on a second. So if you're looking for snow, there's a little bit coming into it's almost to the Canadian border in Montana. There you go. So this is out on day 9. You got a little bit of snow there up in northwestern Montana, maybe a bit in northeastern Idaho. And of course, I know your eyes are fixated on the GFS doing its thing down in Florida there with this next tropical system. And then it turns it east and lifts it up. And yes, for you snow lovers in the Great Lakes, it actually has some snow here along about September 24th. But of course, we're going to write this down because we know it's guaranteed to happen, as well as that we know that the GFS is going to be guaranteed to showing a storm the way it is, that you could write this down that it will be there even though it's 300 hours out. Yeah, right. So there it is. The snow lovers' first peak. That's an actually decent shot of cool air if that were to verify. Wonder how deep the trough is. Let's take a look. Whoa! Boy, that's an amplified trough into the eastern part of the United States. Would for you cooler weather lovers that it gets like that. But we've seen, by the way, these over-amplified looks on the GFS before. We've been led down this path a few times, so I would be very cautious here. I'm just trying to see what it does do in the North Atlantic, and of course, given that it's showing this idea, it would build higher than normal pressures up north of Labrador toward Greenland and on up into the polar regions, ridge up in the west, and a deep but broad trough in the east, with the westerlies going all the way down into northern Florida. If that verifies, that would be some nice shot of cool air coming down for the end of the month. So I wouldn't run to the bank with this yet, okay? You get where I'm going with this. So look, the bottom line is we're going to have stuff to watch. I think by the time we get to the weekend and early next week, I'm guessing that there'll be at least one tropical system running around. Certainly would not surprise me. And in the meantime, we're just going to have some, typical late summer, mid-September weather around here, which most of the time is actually quite uneventful. So, nice crowd here for a Monday. I really hope everybody had a nice weekend. Chuck Cardillo already jumping up and down because you see snow. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, I wouldn't run, like I said, I wouldn't run to the bank here with this. Doesn't make sense. Big high over Greenland and big high over the East Coast. Well, it can make sense if the upper low in between, Mike Talley, is not exactly where you want it to be. So, I mean, you need the upper low, say around 50 north, 50 west. It's not quite there. It's sliding down and stretching down and dropping down closer to the Azores. So you're not really having the kind of impact because of the fact that upper low splits away. That actually allows the ridge to pop up in the east. And in the summer months, when you have a negative NAO, there are a lot of circumstances when you have that negative North Atlantic oscillation with higher than normal pressures in the North Atlantic. It actually leads to very warm to hot weather in parts of the eastern United States. So it's a little bit tricky. It's not always. It doesn't translate quite the same way in the wintertime in the summertime that it does in the wintertime. Does the European show that deep trough that the GFS has at the end of the period? Asked Ryan Ford. Well, the European only goes out to 240 hours. That's available publicly. And I really didn't see anybody posting anything with regarding the long range. My guess is it probably doesn't match up. But, then again, every once in a while, broken clocks are right twice a day, where you could, just like the 240 hour today had the tropical system that the GFS wraps up. The European has something there too, and they're almost in an identical spot. Tuddy's Young. Will this wave coming off the African coast? I don't know if it's going to get to there's no way to know where that's going to wind up, or even if it's going to develop. You're asking me a question about something maybe 10 days to 2 weeks out. I have no idea. I really don't. Nobody does. Okay? Nobody does. The only thing I will say is there is a tendency with weather patterns for things to rhyme. They may not come out exactly the same way, but the track might rhyme. So you may see something. Look at Dorian's track, and then give yourself some room on either side. You might see something relatively similar. I mean, that's kind of how I would approach it at this point. Walter, I hope I said that right. We don't really get hurricanes. The last hurricane we had was about 30-ish years ago, but we do get tail ends. Yeah, and a couple of years ago, Ophelia that transitioned over into a powerful post-tropical cyclone that went inland. You usually get these storms where after they've made their transition from a tropical to a post-tropical cyclone, and then they impact England, Ireland, and Scotland. Every once in a while, you do get something that holds on to its tropical characteristics if it's moving fast enough and gets a little bit of help from the upper atmosphere to keep it going. Joe Gaffney, hi back. Thank you for the clarification. Otherwise, Trash Talk will start on how this is the warmest September ever without any facts. Correct. So we're not even going to go down that particular road. Linda Hernandez, nice to see you on board tonight. Chris Alley, if I don't mention you this time around, I'll mention you in the next time around. Tim Smart, Mirtha Gunter, Shelly Man Studios, Robert Brown, and James NASCAR. Nice to see some of the regulars here jumping on board. So I think that pretty much sums up where we are at this point. There's not a whole lot more I can say regarding to where we're going with all of this down in the next couple of weeks, except to say that I think it's going to be fairly interesting, and I'm guessing that one of those systems, one of those waves, is going to develop over time, and maybe even a couple of them. We're not done with this active period. I'm not seeing any activity of consequence in the Eastern Pacific. There's going to probably be one storm that will form out there during this next week. It's not like we have 3 or 4 systems in the East Pacific where the East Pacific is raging because of the of an El Nino pattern. That's gone. So the activity in the East Pacific remains subdued. The activity in the Central Pacific remains subdued, and as long as that's the case, it's usually where the Atlantic winds up outperforming. Ruthless Goat. So what do I think about Trump wanting to fire meteorologists that disagree with him? This whole thing was so silly and so manufactured. This is because they had reporters jumped on that he said the state of Alabama. Okay, so naturally they had to jump on him. They had to jump at that in order to create a controversy over this. I mean, look, there were models the middle of last week that some of them had this storm going into the Gulf of Mexico. I'm not, this is why I don't want to get wrapped up in all this nonsense that is going on over this. You just had a Category 5 hurricane hit the Bahamas. The northern Bahamas, devastated, okay? You had impact up and down the East Coast. You had impact, except for the area from Delaware to Rhode Island, which is the area that most of us sit in. And then you had this, this storm as a last hurrah, strengthened before it went into Nova Scotia as a Category 2 hurricane / about to become post-tropical cyclone. This is all so needless. It really is. I just think the whole mess was something that reporters just jumped on in order to create some sort of controversy. I guess maybe that's the best way to state it. On the other hand, let the forecasters do their jobs, okay, which is what they do best. And the Hurricane Center and the Weather Service offices through all of this, I think, did a bang-up job in trying to stay on top of the ever-changing models and what was going on an hour-by-hour basis. The forecast, I don't know what the mileage error was on the forecast inside of 60 hours, but I think it was maybe a handful of miles. And that was something that not that many years ago would have been unheard of. The forecast accuracy inside 60 hours has improved tremendously. The intensity part of the forecast equation still remains elusive. As far as trying to nail these periods where you get storms, when you're looking at it out maybe in the longer range, it's hard to say something 120 hours ahead of time is going to become a Category 5 hurricane. So I don't really fault the forecasters for that. I think the message that this was going to be a major hurricane was certainly played fairly well by the Hurricane Center, and that it wound up becoming this buzzsaw monster. Hey, remember the forecast also called for this thing to slow down and stall, and once it became clear that it was going to be more over the Bahamas than over Florida itself, the models did, the forecasters did very well with all of this, and I think they should be applauded for that in a big way. Otherwise, I'll just let the nonsense play out. And this is this and all the crap with climate change and everything else. I just rather stay away from it all. I just like to forecast. I like to look at look at weather, look what's going on, look at the satellites, look at the radars, look at the models, and figure out where we're going with all of that. That's what I'm interested in. Not all this other not all this other garbage that's flying around. Okay, that's enough. 7:45. Let's call it a night. All right. So weather in 5 in the morning, and I got a new microphone and I finally found out why I was having audio problems, because apparently my new computer has 3 microphones built into it, and they weren't shut off. So I had 3 microphones going at the same time, so you were getting all that clipping and static noises because of the levels being too high. Well, I took care of it. So we're going to be, it should be better. I'm hoping. I tested it out a few times today, and then it seemed okay. So weather in 5 tomorrow morning, and we'll update you on what is going on. Patreon members, you of course will get your weather in 10, which you got today, and we talked a lot about this particular issue with regards to what the tropics may do going forward. For those of you who are weather geeks, my Patreon platform is just $2 a month, and the link is up there. We do a lot of extra stuff. You can message me at any time, and I usually try and get back on a timely basis. And you also you get the weather in 10 video, which is just for Patreon members, and extra posts as well, especially when there's stuff going on. So there's a link for you. And by the way, if you're interested, I do have a link on Amazon. If you shop on Amazon, this is a very easy way to support what I'm doing, because if you're going to shop on Amazon and you use this link, you get your stuff. You can use the search bar to get whatever it is you want. I have some stuff there that's listed on the page, but you don't have to purchase that. Just use the search bar to shop for whatever it is you're shopping for. And Amazon throws me a few cigars for sending you there. We're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated site. Thank you, Jason Barry, for using the Amazon link. I really appreciate it. Thank you. It's an easy way. Amazon throws me back some coin. It's out of their pocket and not yours. And I get a couple of cigars or a cup of coffee out of it, and I'm a happy camper. And thanks for those of you who have used that. And yes, Charles Gall, the European nailed this pretty well. 4 or 5 days out. I forgot. I think it was about 5 days out, where it caught on to what was happening with regards to the strength of the ridge. Even though that model was guilty going into it of strengthening the ridge too much and driving the storm to the west, that was the model that on one of the runs took it up into the Gulf states and on up into the Florida Panhandle or toward Mobile or New Orleans, somewhere in there. So yes, once it figured out that was the ridge was going to be not quite as robust, it really nailed the track and the slowing down and the stalling and the move up the coast, straddling the coastline, and the landfall near Nova Scotia. It got it all. So it did a very, very good job indeed. Okay, folks, so weather in 5 tomorrow, weather in 10 for Patreon members, and we'll have our regular live stream tomorrow night, probably at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Good night, everybody.